Alright, hey people, today is November 9th, 2024. It's about 3 o'clock. Sorry for the late start. We're a little late, but I had to figure out where this comment section was, because this is the main reason why I'm doing this video. This is if anyone ever wants to look this up and read the back and forth between me and this guy. It's under this video called "Has Daniel's 70th week been fulfilled?" with Pastor Matt First and Brother Scott Clem on the channel called Spirit of Prophecy, which is ran by Tommy McMurdy. I think it's a fairly decent video. So, anyway, I made a comment that says that was a great discussion, and then someone made a comment, and it looks like they had erased it, because it looks like they were probably saying something about how they disagree, and I was like, well, futurists have no dates when they think Daniel's 70 weeks starts and ends. The dates I have showed you that those can't work, because Jews never used a 360-day calendar, so you can't use that date. And then when they try to do it like from something like Cyrus's decree, I actually have found out that people who think it's Cyrus's decree don't even know good archaeology, and they're trying to start it at dates that you can't know. Biblical or archaeologists that I know of that's highly respected in the field will make the argument that you can use those dates that they try to use. So for right now, Futures they have no start dates. There's no historical context to when they start the prophecy. It just doesn't exist. The arguments have been absolutely horrible, right? Looks like this person has erased all their comments, though. But anyway, that's not the one I'm really focused on. Because this was a comment I made over a year ago. So this guy named James, whatever, makes a comment 5 days ago. He says, "I'd like to point out something that nullifies the possibility that Jesus is the one in Daniel 9:27 and ceases the sacrifice mid through the week. Many people claim that Jesus confirms the Daniel 9 covenant and claim the ceasing of the sacrifices in Daniel 9:27 is Jesus dying on the cross. But that isn't because hold on, I'm sorry. Many people claim that Jesus confirms the Daniel 9 covenant and claim the ceasing of sacrifices in Daniel 9:27 is Jesus dying on the cross. But isn't it because Hebrews 9:15 through 17 says Jesus doesn't confirm his new covenant unless he dies?" Okay, so he's saying, but it can't be. That can't be the case, because Hebrews 9:15 through 17 says Jesus doesn't confirm his new covenant unless he dies. Jesus did not confirm the Daniel 9:27 covenant at the start of his ministry or any other time before he died. Actually, Hebrews 9 clearly states his new covenant wasn't ratified until Jesus died. So if the Daniel 9:27 covenant were Jesus confirming it, the verse should have said that the ceasing of sacrifices was the beginning of the week. It would have been the confirmation of the covenant, because Hebrews 9:16 through 17 says his covenant isn't ratified until he died. If Daniel 9:27 was Jesus, the verse should have said that the 7 years starts from the ceasing of the sacrifices. But the verse clearly states that the ceasing of the sacrifices is midway through those 7 years, which proves the Daniel 9 covenant is confirmed 3.5 years prior to the ending of the sacrifices. So I will read through this and explain what he's trying to say when I bring up the verse. You can't get around Hebrews 9:16 through 17. Not only this verse says it, but Matthew 26:28, Luke 22:20, Mark 14:24, 1 Corinthians 11:24 through 25, all confirm that the covenant is ratified at his death through his blood, not any time before it. So then he brings up Hebrews 22 says, and without the shedding of blood, there is no remission. There is no covenant unless the shedding of blood actually happens. It's impossible according to Hebrews 9:16 through 17. So if people say Jesus confirms the covenant in Daniel 9:27, it would be a blatant contradiction to Hebrews. Daniel 9:16 through 17, because the Daniel 9 covenant is confirmed 3.5 years prior to the ceasing of sacrifices. So how do you reconcile this contradiction? So I'm gonna pull up what he is saying so people can follow along this argument. Let's get the Young's literal translation, which I think is easy enough to follow. Oops, I should have went to Daniel 9, sorry. Daniel 9. Actually, 9:27. So right here we got pretty much what we need. So, I guess it didn't. Wish I could make it a little bit bigger, but we'll work with it. No, you know what? I don't want to have to do that. That's not going to look good. Just wonder why it won't pull up Daniel 9:27. Oh, I didn't put 9:27. No wonder it was doing that. Sorry, I wasn't really sure how I was going to do this video. This is all just like spur of the moment. I think this is the translation I need. So it says, and he has strengthened a covenant with many 1 week. So what he's trying to say is that this word right here in a lot of Bibles would be confirmed. And confirm, strengthen. It's you can get the same thing out of the same Hebrew word. I personally think strengthen makes more sense. But whether you say confirmed or strengthened, you're still basically saying the same thing. And he has strengthened a covenant with many 1 week. So what he's saying is that he believes that verse 27 is about the antichrist. So what he's saying is he is strengthening a covenant with many for 1 week. So he's making a 7-year treaty. And we know this because, every week in Daniel is supposed to be a 7-year period of time, right? And people haven't seen past videos, just watch past videos, read up on this. I'm just this is mainly for people who already know this prophecy and already know that the 70 weeks are supposed to be 490 years, right? And that each week represents 7 years based on a Jewish sabbatical cycle, right? Because that's why it's given. Because why were the Jews in captivity? You read earlier, it's 70 years of captivity because they went and observed they went and let the land rest every 7 years, so God's punishing them. Now that punishment's about ready to end. It's around the year 538 when this part's written, or maybe about 538, somewhere around there. So 538 BC. And so Daniel's writing this because he knows that the 70 years of captivity are over or just about to be over. I would say they are over. He's writing it knowing they are over. And now he knows, so now he's praying to God and he gets this vision, right? Just to give people who haven't seen this just a rough idea, who don't know what I'm talking about. That's how you know the 70 weeks are 490 years and each week's 7 years. That's all I want you to basically get. So when it says 1 week, these people think this verse is about an antichrist. So they're thinking this has to be a 7-year covenant. So what that guy was arguing in that comment section was that we know that he's saying basically that Jesus would have to die at the if I think this is about Jesus, then Jesus has to die at the beginning of this in order to strengthen the covenant with Manny, because it doesn't start to be strengthened until he dies, right? And I know his ministry, it looks like he got baptized. To me, it looks like he got baptized at the start of this week, but I would not say he strengthened the covenant at the start of this week. And this is where the issue is lying at, because he's thinking that this means that an antichrist or whoever this he is making a covenant with Manny for a whole week. So he's thinking, oh, this means someone, when he's reading this, it sounds to him, and maybe I should bring up another version, because I bet, let me do like New King, New King James, Daniel 9:27, because I bet that's where he's probably reading a book, something like that, where he's getting some kind of weird wording. And I'm going to show you the difference. Trying to figure out which. Okay, this is kind of going to work, because now I can get a whole bunch of different versions. So when you read it from like the King James, they add words to it, and then so we're going to see where he's getting tripped up at. Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. So what he's thinking is this word for, then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. So this English version's adding the word for to it. So to some people, now I still wouldn't read it that way despite that word being put in there. But what the mental connection he's trying to make is that he's saying that this antichrist or whoever it is, if they make a covenant, it's going to be with many people for 7 years. But in the midst of that 7 years, he'll bring an end to sacrifice and offering. But he's thinking that the whole covenant has to last 7 years. But if you look at that Young's, oh, let me get rid of this ad. But if you look at Young's, what we see is the word for is not in there. And so in the English, I don't know if it's bad to put the word for in there. I'm just saying that's what's tripping him up. But when you read the Hebrew, the word for is not in there. So therefore, all this verse is telling you is okay, like when the 62 weeks happens, or well, hold on, let me go back up to the 7 years, right? So thou dost know, and thou dost consider wisely, from the going forth of the word to restore and build Jerusalem till Messiah the leader is 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The broad place has been built again, and the rampart even in the distress of times. Okay, so right here, this is supposed to happen sometime within the first 7-year period, and it's supposed to be done by the ending of the 7-year period. But was it built that whole time from the beginning of that 7-year period until the ending of it? No, I mean, it did not take a whole 49 years to do all this. It was starting to be built. When I look at Nehemiah, it looks like it starts to get built around 445 BC. And I think it gets finished before 408 BC. Because I believe, the decree to restore and build Jerusalem is obviously in Ezra 7, because that's the largest decree I can even read in the whole Bible. And on top of, by a king, on top of that, it's very detailed, and it fits the whole time frame of the prophecy, 490 years, 457 BC to 34 AD. So we see that this is broken up 7 weeks and 62 weeks. So this first part, I believe it's telling us what's happening in the first 7 weeks, right? This part. I wish they did not break this verse up here, 29. I wish they would have just had it continue, because what it is this is telling you what's going to happen the first 7 years. This is what's going to tell, and then there's the first 49 years, the first 7 weeks. And this second verse, right, and this next sentence is telling you, and after 62 weeks, Messiah is cut off. All right. So, but we don't think this lasted a full 7 weeks, right? 49 years. We don't think that lasted that far. Same thing down here. And he has strengthened the covenant with many 1 week. It's just telling you sometime within this week it's going to be strengthened. It's telling you about this last week. That's all it's telling you about. And he has strengthened the covenant with many 1 week. And that word hath is probably throwing people off. And in the midst of that week he shall cause the sacrifice and present to cease, right? And by the wing of abominations, this should be one is making desolate, not he's not in there. It should be one is making desolate. Actually, I don't even know if one is even in that verse, if I think about it. So these things get added to it, and it just kind of throws people off. And on the wing of abominations is one making desolate. So it's not really even pointing to the same he that's causing the sacrifice and present to cease, or is it pointing to the same strengthen the covenant with many? It's the one that's doing this is someone different according to the Hebrew, like the way it's doing the grammar pointing. Even until the consummation, and that which is determined is poured out upon the desolate. But one's not in there. It just says desolate. So someone, even Young's literal is not, to me, not literal. But so the argument starts to be from this guy. So I'm going to read more of his argument, because we're going to see how I responded to him. This is just to give people a framework of what he's trying to say. So he says, yes, but Jesus did confirm or strengthen his covenant. Let me see if I can blow this up a little bit more. Yes, but Jesus did or confirm. Let me take myself out of the picture. Maybe that might be even better. Yes, but Jesus did or confirm or strengthen his covenant at the cross. Whether it says confirmed or strengthened doesn't change anything. He ratified it at the cross according to Hebrews 9:16. I agree with that. Not 3.5 years before the cross. I agree with that. I don't think the language is even saying that. The new covenant was announced in the Old Testament, but it didn't come into effect until Jesus died. Announcing and confirming aren't the same. One more thing I will point out. The two biggest reasons why I don't believe Daniel 9:27 is Jesus is because the Bible says his new covenant is ratified at the cross, not 3.5 years prior to it. And also because verse 27 of Daniel 9 states he confirms the covenant for 7 years. No, it does not say it's for 7 years. I'm going to get into the Hebrew. Don't worry. I got all that argument up there. So you're gonna see deep Hebrew study. But God's covenant is not for 7 years. His new covenant is everlasting. Everlasting is not 7 years. God doesn't make a new temporary covenant for 7 years. His only new covenant is everlasting. I agree with that. So you can see where he's coming from, right? You can't say Daniel 9:27 is Jesus strengthening his covenant and ending the sacrifices after 3.5 years, because the Bible clearly states the New Testament covenant isn't ratified until Jesus dies. Like I said before, if Daniel 9:27 was Jesus, the ceasing of sacrifices would have been at the beginning of the 7 years. It would be the confirmation of it, because Hebrews 9:16 through 17 demands it, but Daniel 9:27 says it's the middle of those 7 years. I don't see how Daniel 9:27 is Jesus. So I see. I would also say like, because these people want to teach the Antichrist is making a 7-year treaty and then he's going to break it with Israel. That's normally what at least 90% of them will say, or something. And then the other will say some little variants, but they'll all say it's like a 7-year covenant, and it'll be like, look, it's clear. And because they're doing the same thing with the wording of this, it does not say how long the covenant's gonna be for. It just says it will strengthen a covenant with many 1 week, because there's a 7-year period left. That's all that wording is saying. That's all that Hebrew wording is saying, is that there's 7 years left, and sometime in the middle of that, he's going to strengthen a covenant. It does not say how long. Those people are just kind of um, assuming that into the text, and it does not have to 100% be read that way. So here, I'll read some of the comments real quick before I get too far. So Adrian says he doesn't get notifications. King of Earth says, "Oh, it's saying that the 7 years after I glanced, it's saying that 7 years after I glanced Jerusalem and rebuilt it, and I get to walk again." I'm not sure what you mean. Adrian says Hebrews is strongly saying that the new covenant rather than strengthening an old covenant. Well, I'll go into that too, because actually it is strengthening. Um, and the word new there is kanos. That's different than the word neos. So there's two Greek words that people use for new, but there's a difference between kanos and neos. So because it's in kanos, it does fit what the Hebrew says, right? The Hebrew is basically has a word that's like strengthening and confirming, right? But to confirm something means it's basically already there, right? So he's confirming something that would already, or strengthening something. That means he's strengthening a covenant. I mean, I guess it could be that there's some other covenant being written, but if you really think about the Bible, it looks like Jesus is just confirming a covenant that's always been there, and that the way the covenant was trying to be made wasn't working all the other ways, right? But it would look like a similar covenant, like, Adam and Eve sin, the animal gets killed, the skins of that animal are put on them to cover their nakedness. Abraham, he gets ready to sacrifice his son, and then he says, the Lord will provide a lamb, and so they find a ram in a thicket, and he sacrifices it. That to me, it looks like this like prophesied covenant, and I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong with that wording, but that's what it looks like to me. So I'm just letting you understand, and I'll go into that whole the Greek and Kanos and everything, because that is part of my argument. He said, Chris, I think at the end of the week the message went to the Gentiles after Stephen's stoning. It's either after Stephen's stoning, or I think it is after Stephen's stoning, but it could be Cornelius, when he went to that Gentile's house. That might be it. I don't know, but the stoning of Stephen actually makes a lot of sense to me. But I'm open. I haven't really nailed that one down for myself. I haven't done like this kind of deep study into it. But anyway, so I say Daniel 9:27, during 1 week, he will make a firm covenant with many. That's how I read Daniel 9:27. This seems to indicate at some point Jesus will strengthen a covenant during a period of 7 years. I don't know if you claim a rigid understanding as to if the beginning of the 7 years that he starts to strengthen a covenant. I think the language is a bit open. So what I'm saying is, I don't know if he's holding to a rigid understanding of the Hebrew, that he's saying that when you read verse 9:27, the start of it, and he shall confirm a covenant for it, and that word with, it's also for many. So you could say for many or with many. He shall confirm a covenant for many 1 week. So to me, it just sounds like he's going to confirm a covenant for many 1 week, that final 7-year period. Just like with the first 7 weeks, they built they rebuilt a wall and everything like that. It didn't take a full 49 years. So that's just one of the things that happened. And I think there's similar language in Daniel 9:27. It's not saying that that whole period is going to be 7 years. Or that the covenant itself is 7 years, or that the process of confirming it is 7 years. It's not, because it's not a 7-year process of confirming it, and I don't think it's I don't think it's confirmed at the beginning of the 7 years. I don't see nothing in the text that says that. It doesn't, and to be clear, it doesn't even say that it's going to be confirmed in the middle of the week. This is something we only know because the crucifixion happens, and we know, oh, that was the new covenant right there, right? Or the Kanos covenant, right? Um, that was the strengthening of the covenant. We don't see, and so when you see it after the fact, because that's how prophecy was supposed to be. It seems pretty clear, when is this covenant confirmed, or how is it confirmed? Oh, and you just see this weird thing put in there, and sacrifice and offer, and he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering. A Jew reading that might not even think that has anything to do with the Messiah dying. They see that the Messiah will die after 69 weeks, but they probably have no idea that, oh, that's how the covenant's confirmed. But when you put two and two together after the fact, you're like, wait a minute, Messiah died after 483 years. And there was a 7-year period from 27 AD to 34 AD that he dies in. And when he died, it seemed to put the end to ended the need for sacrifice and offering. And then you're like, oh, wait a minute, that's how he confirms the covenant. See, but all this stuff, it's written in a way to where you figure it out after the fact, but there's enough detail to where you can figure out that's what it actually was. But before the fact happens, you wouldn't know. So anyway, he says the verse 27 is saying the covenant is confirmed for 7 years and a half. Now, some of this I won't read because I think he just kind of repeats himself, and I just want to get to my points. So he says, verse 27 says the covenant is confirmed for 7 years, and then halfway through it, the sacrifice stops. If it says it's confirmed for 7 years, then the confirmation is at the beginning of the 7 years. But it's not confirmed for 7 years. See, he keeps adding that word for in there, and it's not in there. So, and you guys already know all this stuff, so I'm not going to bother reading that. So he lists the 6 things, and he says these things. Well, the 6 things are laid out in Daniel 9:24: finishing the transgression, making an end to sins, make reconciliation for iniquity, bring everlasting righteousness, seal vision and prophecy, anoint the most holy. These things will be fulfilled in Israel by the end of the 70 weeks, because verse 24 literally says this prophecy is appointed unto Daniel's people, Israel, and his city in Jerusalem. But how is the most holy place anointed within this prophecy. Because this guy, if you think about this, he just killed his own argument again, because he puts anoint the most holy. Well, the Hebrew, it looks like it says the most holy place. But whether you think this is referring to Jesus or the sanctuary, or maybe Jesus himself is the holy place, what, this still can only happen at the crucifixion, right? Or with the crucifixion. So the problem with this prophecy is, when you read it, it says, and after 62 weeks. So that means it's after 69 weeks altogether, because the first 7 weeks was restoring and building Jerusalem again, the rampart, and even in the distress of times. Okay, so that's already happened. That was the first. And then after the 62 weeks, Messiah's cut off. Okay, that means after 483 years. So if it's happening after the 69 weeks, there's only 1 week left. But this part up here has to happen within the 70 weeks. So you cannot put a gap there, because how did the most the how did the how did he how was the most holy of holies anointed? Are you a Seventh-day Adventist or something, where you think, oh my gosh, Jesus went and entered the heavenly sanctuary in 1844? Are you a Seventh-day Adventist? And so you're mixing Seventh-day Adventism and with your futurism, and you got your Daniel 70th week, but then that 7-year period would have had to happen sometime in 1844, because that's got to fit into the prophecy, right? So you got like a weird Seventh-day Adventist, because you're sort of taking their prophecy and you're pushing it into the future. Well, I mean, their Daniel 8 prophecy somehow, and then and you're saying that Jesus is going to anoint the Holy of Holies. Or maybe you're not some Adventist. Maybe you think you got a version of 1844 and it's way in the future, right? October 22nd, 1844, where Jesus is supposed to enter the Holy of Holies, right? The second compartment in the heavenly temple. But whenever he does this, that 70th week has to occur, because the Messiah is not cut off until after 69 weeks altogether. So the house is anointing the Holy of Holies happening. If it's 483 years is over with, because it says after. If I go, um, it's like, after means like those 483 years are behind you. That's no longer a part of time anymore. That it has passed, right? That's what that word after means in Hebrew, and in English. That's what after means. It means that's gone and passed. So you cannot use these 69 weeks and no longer in the prophecy. And now Messiah is cut off afterwards. So there's only 1 week left. So you must not think Jesus anointed the most holy of holies, which I think is kind of blasphemy, right? You're basically denying God at this point, because it's like, how did that happen? How would sealing up the sins happen without his sacrifice? How would iniquity be covered up without a sacrifice? How would bringing in righteousness, age enduring? How would that be done without his sacrifice? So it has to be done within this 490 years, but we see that word after, and so we only have 1 week left. See, this is just very logical. These people make this so much harder than what it needs to be. Simple logic, even without knowing a bunch of history and archaeology. Just simple. I'm using critical thinking, and this is simply, I see the word after. I know there's only 1 week left. And Messiah gets cut off in that week, right? And as long as you know, basically 457 BC is when that decree of Artaxerxes in the 7th year was given, and you read Ezra 7, you go, wow, that really sounds like it. That sounds like it could fit. And you see that, okay, 490 years later is 34 BC. So let's take that 7-year period of time from 34 to 27 AD. And do we see Messiah getting cut off? Do we see anything like something being done that causes sacrifice and offerings to cease? We see his crucifixion. And is that, and when he does his crucifixion, does it accomplish any of these things in here? Because if it does, then all this cannot be outside in some gap, right? It has to be within the 70 weeks, the 490 years. So these things will be now he's saying these things will be fulfilled in Israel by the end of the 70 weeks. How does Israel anoint them? I guess he's saying Israel will anoint the most holy Jesus. And that Israel will bring in everlasting righteousness. I don't know. Israel will make an end of sins. When was the end of sins done? I guess you're saying that in this final week, Jesus is going to come, stop the antichrist, and make an end of sins, make a reconciliation for iniquity, seal vision and prophecy, anoint the most holy. I don't know. It seems like it just fits better with Jesus. I guess there's a way you could finagle that, maybe twist that and get that to be Israel. This means by the end of the 70 weeks, Israel has to accomplish all of this, and they will be fully restored to God. Well, I don't see how Israel restores it. It seems like Jesus would have to do this. But this hasn't happened yet. This is another reason why I don't believe the 70 weeks are over, because this is a restoration prophecy for Israel. And I think Layman's Seminary teaches a similar thing. I know Pastor Tommy will disagree because he doesn't believe in a restoration of Israel, but I believe the Bible is clear it will happen. Also, I know that when we accepted Jesus as Lord, he made an end of sins and reconciliation for iniquity to us Gentiles. But this specific 490-year prophecy isn't about us. It's for the Jews. Well, yeah, it was for the Jews, but it also wound up being for us too. Verse 24 also says it will take 490 years to accomplish these things. But if he already made an end to sins and reconciliation for iniquity, and you agree that that was done by Jesus, that has to be done within the 490 years, because that's part of the prophecy. It will take a full 490 years for them to finally accept Jesus as Lord. Oh, okay. So all the Jew people that call themselves Jews that have accepted Jesus, you guys haven't really accepted Jesus, because it's going to take 490 years for you to finally accept it. So all those Jews between the death of Jesus till now, they're liars, according to this guy, I guess, because it's going to take them 490 years to finally accept Jesus as Lord. And that's the reason why it's been well over 2,000 years and they still haven't accepted Messiah. So you still haven't accepted Messiah, according to this guy. So now we know any kind of Messianic Jew, they're all liars, according to this guy, because it takes 490 years for them to accept Jesus. So if you ever see a Messianic Jew, according to this guy, just call him a liar, I guess. Because it's going to take you 490 years, and we know this Daniel 70th week hasn't happened yet, so you're a liar. It will resume when the Antichrist arrives and confirms the covenant with for the last week. So all these people are basically waiting around for the Antichrist to confirm a covenant, and then are like, as soon as he confirms a covenant, that's when the final 7 years of Daniel starts, based on that grammar argument. And I've shown the Hebrew here, and this Hebrew right here, I said, and he shall cause a covenant to prevail. I mean, that's another way you could look at that wording, right? So, and he shall cause a covenant to prevail 1 week, right? Um, Well, you know what? I don't think that's right. I don't know where I got that from. I was looking at someone else's interpretation. So that's kind of a dumb comment because I don't think I think it says like for Manny 1 week. So I'm just gonna kind of skip it here because I think he's just basically keeps arguing the same thing. Let me see here because now I'm going to start to get more deeper into the Hebrew. So I go, you're not understanding what I'm pointing out. The language does not say it's a covenant for only 7 years. If I say next week I will buy a car, in the midst of the week it will be purchased, I still bought the car during the week. The purchase lasts for longer than that week. So he says, and now he's claiming the Bible never says that he confirms a covenant during the week. It says that he confirms a covenant for 1 week. The word, see, again, the word for is not in there. And now he's telling me I'm stretching it too far. You said for yourself, he causes a covenant to prevail, to be effective for 1 week. No, I did not say that. I said he causes a covenant to prevail, but it doesn't say for 1 week. It just says 1 week. And then he's like getting mad and saying, I don't know how much more clearer I can be. I go, you're asserting your interpretation of the Hebrew language demands only your interpretation, and it simply does not. The interpretation I laid out is an acceptable interpretation. That verse is basically telling you there's 1 week left in the 70 weeks, and Messiah comes to confirm the covenant with many in the middle of the 7 years. He will make a covenant with many 1 week. The word for is not in the Hebrew, so you cannot say only for a week, though it's an understandable interpretation. Like, I understand why you're trying to make it. And if it fit everything else, if you could get everything else to fit, maybe you could argue that's what it actually is saying, right? But the way the Hebrew's laid out, it's not laid out where it's like 100%. That's what it's absolutely saying. So that's what I'm trying to say. It's not like, maybe if everything else matched up to what he's trying to say, and all the wording, all the events, all the dating, I'm saying maybe you could pull that out of it, but from the Hebrew as it basically is, it doesn't say that it's going to be a covenant for 1 week. It could actually be the Antichrist. Like, if you think that's really the Antichrist, it could be the Antichrist making a covenant for 100 years. It does not say how long because the word for isn't in there. It just says and sometime in the 7 year period he's going to make a covenant. So let's say you think that's the Antichrist. So I guess if the Antichrist came on the scene and the Antichrist made a covenant for 8 years, you'd be like, oh, that's not the Antichrist, it's for 8 years. See, now all the Antichrist has to do is make a covenant for 8 years, and he's got you all fooled, right? You don't think the Antichrist could be smart enough to listen to all these people teaching this and go, oh, hey, all I got to do is make a covenant for 8 years, and bam, they're all fooled, right? But the covenant could be 8 years, it could be 100 years. You don't know. It does not say that it will be for 7 years because the word for is not in there. So anyway, I say the word for is not in the Hebrew, so you cannot say for only 1 week, though it's an understandable interpretation. I understand why some could think that, but it's basically like saying I will purchase a car next week, and sometime in the middle of the week I will buy the car. Or it's quite possible that the language could mean something to the effect of working out the details of the purchasing agreement, and then in the middle of the week purchasing the car. Now, I don't think that's what the language is saying, but I'm like, that maybe someone could draw that from it, right? Like, I'm not going to be upset if someone says it could mean that. But when you start saying that absolutely means that no, the Hebrew wording does not give no absolute that it could mean something like this, right? I think it's closer to being like what I'm saying here, but even I'm not claiming an absolute, but I'm thinking it sounds stronger to like saying it's like I, I, um I will buy a car next week, and in the middle of the week I will lose my boat and my car. Now, it could be that the car gets purchased with my boat and my car, and that's why I lost my boat and my. Well, I mean, hold on, my it's like I'll buy a car and I lose my boat and my house. Let me say boat and house or something. So if I lost my boat and house in the middle of the week, maybe I lost my boat and the house because I bought a car, and I used that money to do it with, right? But that's not saying that the purchase is lasting a whole week. I do not think the Hebrew language in this verse is as rigid as what you're asserting it to be, but the language does indicate that the one that does make desolate is not the same he who makes a covenant. And the datings of the decrees don't even line up to the interpretation you're trying to demand, which is part of my problem. But he never addresses that part of it, right? No futurist will address this dating argument in any sort of manner. They really try to argue against it because they just want to jump to verse 27 and then start doing their Bible fan fiction. And so he's saying now you're guilty of inserting your interpretation to the text because in Hebrew it does say 7 years, and every single English translation I checked. I'm not saying it doesn't. Okay. So basically, he's kind of just going off saying it's 7 years, right? And I'm like, so let me just get down to here because there's no sense in reading that. So I tell him, I'm not saying that it's not 7 years. Please follow what I'm saying. I know it's 7 years. My analogy is about a literal week. I'm not saying just because my analogy involves using a 7-day period of time that I think the prophecy is about a 7-day period of time. What I'm saying is that when it says he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, that covenant he's confirming is not lasting only 7 years, nor is it taking him 7 years to confirm it. I am saying that the language is saying that at some point during the 7 years, he will strengthen a covenant. And that Hebrew word used for strengthen or confirm, that would indicate that there was already an existing covenant, and all he's doing is strengthening an already existing covenant or confirming an already existing covenant. So he says, but excuse me, nowhere does it say at some point of the 7 years he confirms a covenant. You're asserting at some point of the 7 to the text. Well, he's asserting that it says 4. Like, I mean, when the word 4 is not even in there. So I'm just basically telling him, yeah. And he says, even if it doesn't say 4, it still says that he shall confirm a covenant a week. Right. It says he shall confirm a covenant 1 week. All right. He shall confirm a covenant. And then we saw like how Young's does it. Why does Young's use these dashes right here? See that? Even Young's literal translation, and this person is not a futurist either. I mean, this person's not I think the person who translated this believes in that this is about the Antichrist, if I remember right. So when it says, and he has strengthened a covenant with many, why does he have these dashes here? And he puts 1 week. I mean, now I guess you could, if everything else matched, maybe you could imply that this strengthening happens a whole week. But that would mean that that's getting stronger all week, and for one whole 7-year period of time. Because if he's strengthening a covenant or confirming a covenant, it will confirm, make firm, right? Make firm, strengthened for 1 week. How's the Antichrist making it firm the whole 7 years? Because a lot of people say that in the middle of the week, he shall cause sacrifice and present to cease. And I've been told by futurists, this means he's going to break it. So how, if he's breaking it in the middle of the week, how is he strengthening it a whole week, but he's breaking it in the middle of the week? It's like, I mean, it's such a contradiction. So he's strengthening it for 7 years, but he's also breaking it in the middle of it. Well, is he doing it for 7 years or is it not? I guess they probably have some workaround with it, but it to me it sounds like it's contradicting itself. And speaking of confirming covenants, could you please tell me what Hebrews 9:15 through 17 means to you? Because it says, and for this reason, he is a mediator of a new covenant by means of the death of his death for the redemption and transgressions under the first covenant, that those who are called may receive the promise of eternal inheritance. For where there is this testament, there must also be the necessity of the death necessity be the death of the testator. I'm sorry. For a testament is not in force after men are dead, since it has no power at all while the testator lives. Right. So he was actually saying a lot of stuff to me, and I think he must have took it away, because I think he started calling me like a bunch of names, and I think he realized it and he removed it, because I don't remember seeing it as I'm reading this. So anyway, I said your responses sound like you're very emotional about whatever prophecy teacher you got this from. And I can tell whatever false prophecy teacher you're listening to only focused on Daniel 9:27 and not the rest of the scripture. If I was to talk to this person, I know good and well that they would not be able to give me the dates and times of everything going on in the prophecy, meaning they didn't really study it because they don't really care. So therefore, when they got down to verse 9:27, they're just making things up. Jesus often spoke of fulfilling and strengthening the existing covenant, Luke 24:44. The new covenant described in the New Testament is seen as a renewal or fulfillment of the old covenant, aligning with the ideal of strengthening rather than creating something entirely new. Confirm, strengthen. The Hebrew word um, vehibber, the Higber. I'm sorry, I'm not fluent in Hebrew, and all I do is read this stuff, so I don't pronounce it in my head. Um, Used in Daniel 9:27 means to confirm or strengthen, and people want to know what word I'm trying to pronounce. Anyway, used in Daniel 9:27 means to confirm or strengthen. This verb implies reinforcing or making something stronger, which can suggest an existing covenant being reinforced or confirmed during the specified period. So, bara or asa are verbs used for creating or making something new, which is not the verb used in Daniel 9:27. So these people, they want to say, oh, the antichrist is making a covenant or creating a covenant with many for 1 week. Well, why isn't bara and asa used? Why is the word confirm used, or vehigber, right? Um, or vehigber, or something like that. Why is that word used, which means confirm or strengthen? But so we don't see bara or asa are verbs used for creating or making something new, which is not the verb used in Daniel 9:27, right? So what you'll see is, if you read like early in Genesis, you'll see that word because God's creating things, right? But we don't see that, when we read Genesis, it's not using the word confirm and strengthen all over the place. When you read the very first chapter of Genesis, it's not saying God's confirming the earth. The earth was void and without form, and God, and God confirmed the lights. It's like, and God confirmed the moon and the sun. It doesn't say those. It's like bara and asa. This is much like the events in the first seven sevens, 49 years, did not take up a whole 49 years. They were started and finished at different points within the 49 years. The same thing is basically being said about the last week. So he ignores the argument about bara and asa not being in there. And he's not even telling me why confirm and strengthen are used instead. So he says, I will ask again, what does Hebrews 9:15 through 17 mean to you? If you can't answer, you're showing you only care about what you want. I thought I did answer it and maybe my response got moved away. So he said, this understanding supports that the new covenant mentioned in Hebrews is not entirely new in the sense of being created from scratch, but rather a renewal or strengthening of the existing covenant. Similarly, when Jesus spoke of a new commandment in John 13:34, he's emphasizing a fresh, deeper understanding and application of the commandment to love one another. And what was that fresher and deeper understanding? Because the Jews were supposed to love one another, but Jesus goes, as I loved you. So he made that deeper. That's why it's a new commandment, because he added, just as I loved you. um so again, he says, when is God's new covenant confirmed? Hebrews says it's confirmed the moment Jesus dies. I think I already pointed all that out. And now he's claiming that 927 says the covenant is confirmed 3.5 years prior to the ceasing of the sacrifices, because the ending of the sacrifices happens mid through the week. Well, how is it confirmed if it's happening in the middle of the week? And I don't think that it's saying that at all. And he was trying to say that, no, it's saying it's a 7-year covenant, but it doesn't say it. It just says he will confirm a covenant with many 1 week. It's sort of like saying 1 week I will confirm a covenant with many. 1 week I will buy a car. I will buy a car 1 week. Am I buying the car the whole week? No. There's going to be a week where I buy a car. That's all it's saying. I will buy a car 1 week. So again, I say, well, verse 927 does not say when the covenant is strengthened or confirmed during the 7 years. It just says it will happen at some point. But knowing Jesus was crucified sometime between the last 7 years of the prophecy and the midst of the week, and I say 27 AD to 34 AD, and knowing he was crucified in 30 or 31 AD, then it matches up to the middle of that 7 years. And I do that because some people will say it was a 2-year ministry. Some people will say it's 3.5, like me. But a Hebrew reader would not be able to read the Hebrew and know at what point during the 7 years the covenant is strengthened or confirmed. See, this is important because Messiah was not predicted to the exact day. Now it winds up getting almost very close to it, right? But the wording is worded in a way where you wouldn't know the exact year, the exact day, and everything, because God could have wrote it that way if he wanted to. But it's supposed to be something where you read it after the fact and you're like, oh, and it hits you. But a Hebrew reader would not be able to read the Hebrew and know at what point the 7 years of the covenant is strengthened or confirmed. And he hath confirmed a covenant with many 1 week. Young's literal translation. There is no event that took a whole 49 years to complete. The events described in the first 49 years took less than 49 years. But the various events were started and completed at various times during the 49 years. That is all verse 27 is saying. And he has strengthened the covenant with many for 1 week. So the question is, how did he strengthen the covenant with many that final week? And then it tells you, in the midst of the week, he shall cause sacrifice and oblation to cease. That's how the Hebrew is read. That's what English versions say. The wording does not even say when exactly he puts an end to sacrifice and offering. It just says it will be at some point during the middle of the beginning of the 7 years and its end. Okay. So it will be some point at the middle between the beginning of the 7 years and its end, the midst or the middle. In fact, a Jew reading this prior to the crucifixion would not even know how or when the covenant would be strengthened during the 7 years, and might not even think ending the sacrifice and offerings had anything to do with strengthening the covenant. This would be something realized after the fact. This is similar to me saying, I will get a car 1 week, and in the middle of that week, I will lose my Rolex and my boat. That sentence is not saying it will take me a whole week to get a car. It can be purchased in a few minutes by me or someone else. It does not take the whole week. Also, it says I will get a car, but initially you are not told how I will get the car. You are also told I will lose my Rolex. I meant to say Rolex and boat. But then you find out I traded my Rolex and boat to get a really nice car. Then you know the car was obtained through the trade I made that week. I don't know how you are reading that to determine when the covenant is made. Um, it only tells us that during the yeah, so it's not even telling us even when the way I understand that prophecy, it's not even telling us when that covenant is made. We don't know. All we know is in the middle, sometime in the middle, there's going to be a covenant with many that is confirmed or strengthened, sometime within that 7 year period, and then sometime in that 7 year period, he shall put in sacrifice to offerings, and yeah, for an end to sacrifice and offerings. That's all we know. Just like if I told you next week I'm going to get a car. I'm going to lose my Rolex and in the midst of that week, I'm going to lose my Rolex and my boat. You wouldn't that's you cannot say for 100% sure just because I'm losing my Rolex and boat during the middle of the week. That's how I'm getting my car. But after the fact, and you see me, I don't have a boat, I don't have a car, and you see that on the same day, I wind up I don't have my Rolex and boat, and I have a car, and it all happens on the same day. You start to, oh, okay, so that's how he got the car in the middle of the. So that's how he got his car. That's all I'm basically saying. And we know because it's Jesus that was crucified, it's an everlasting covenant. But the Jews reading this prior to crucifixion would not know the length of the covenant. There's nothing in Daniel 9:27 to tell us. Yeah, you're not going to know that. You're still not going to know until after the fact how an everlasting covenant is even created during that period. So basically, the action confirming, strengthening the covenant happens within the specified time frame, not that the covenant's duration is limited to that time frame. So this is right here's everything I'm saying. The action confirming, strengthening the covenant happens within the specified time frame, not that the covenant's duration is limited to that time frame. He cannot make an argument from the Hebrew going, no, this Hebrew word right here is saying that the covenant is going to last for this, because the word for is not in there. For example, so I already went through that example about buying a car. So I already said all that. So it's just like me repeating a point, which I've already done. So I'm not going to kill everybody on that. So again, he says, verse 27 says, the covenant's confirmed 7 years, and the ceasing of sacrifices happens in the middle of the 7 years. The covenant in Daniel 27 is confirmed prior to the ceasing. No. See, he just keeps asserting and repeating the same thing, but he's not making new points, and he's not addressing, like, he still has not addressed Bara and Asa not being in that verse, because he's thinking make a covenant, but make a covenant's not in there. The word make is not in there. What is confirm? Confirm means you're confirming something that's already there. So are you telling me someone else is drawing up a 7-year covenant and he's confirming that 7-year covenant? Because I think if that in that case, it should say, and someone will draw up a covenant with the Antichrist, and the Antichrist will confirm it. Then you could maybe imply that, oh, maybe confirming it means signing it, or maybe that covenant had some kind of stipulation to it, like, if you give us all this land, you can make a covenant with us, right? But we're not told, like, I mean, how's he confirming this? Well, when is it? Who wrote the covenant in the first place? Who wrote it? Like, all these questions you have to, like, what like, nothing he's saying is even addressing all this. So I'm going to read this. I'm not sure how much it matters. They have been a wicked nation for a long time. They have been reconciled to God yet, but they will. So, they haven't been reconciled to God yet, but they will. God will have mercy and restore them when they confess their sins and seek him. Hosea 5:15, Romans 11:25 through 29, Acts 15. I don't know what all this has to do with this. If you read Daniel 9, starting from verses 3 through 20, you see that Daniel prayed and confessed their sins to God and asked for forgiveness. Daniel prayed for restoration of Israel, and God gave the 70-week prophecy as an answer to his prayer by sending the message through the angel Gabriel. Basically, what Daniel said is, God, we have sinned. Please forgive my nation Israel. And God answers with the 70 weeks prophecy by saying that Israel will accomplish the 6 things listed in verse 24 by the end of the 70 weeks. So this is just kind of an earlier assertion. He's reasserting the restoration hasn't happened yet, but it will. God said himself. Yeah, I think I've already went on how. So anyway, he says, you are forbidden to exclude Israel from the everlasting covenant, because Paul literally says in Romans 9, 3 through 5, that the adoption, glory, and covenants given of the law and service of God will still belong to Israel. But we can all be grafted into Israel. What about that whole grafted in thing? See, this is where I just, his replacement theology is getting in the way of his understanding the Bible. Because Gentiles did not replace Israel. We simply got grafted in and became Israel, spiritual Israel. So, because if we don't belong to Israel, if we're not grafted in, we're in big trouble. We're going to hell. We need to be grafted into Israel. So your interpretation is actually denying people salvation, in my opinion, because in my understanding, because if we're not Israel, we're going to hell. You have to be grafted in, and you get grafted in by believing in Jesus Christ as the Messiah. This does not mean that they are saved just because they are Israelites. He really makes this like horrible, is butchering Revelations where it says, them that call themselves Jews but are the synagogue of Satan. And then, then it says God's not a respecter of genealogies, because it tells you not to make arguments about genealogies. He's doing these people are doing everything God forbids you to do. Don't make arguments about genealogies. But here he is making an argument about genealogy when the Bible clearly says, do not make an argument about genealogy. You're not supposed to do that. And those that call themselves Jews but are not, but are the synagogue of Satan, are people who are trying to claim to be Jews and Christians but denying Jesus Christ. Because there's false Christians. And false Christians are the same thing as being a false Jew, because you know what? The Jewish religion, guess what it is? I believe in the book of Moses, and every Christian has to. Anyone that is part of Israel has to believe in the book of Moses and all the scriptures, because Jesus is the Messiah that's prophesied in it. And if you don't believe that Jesus is that prophesied Messiah, you don't believe the scriptures. So you have to believe these same Jewish scriptures. And if you're not believing that, you're not really part of that Jewish religion. That's why I really hate the term calling those people who don't believe in Jesus Jews, because I think it confuses people like this. So I say, he was saying some things to me about being dishonest, and so you see me getting a little testy here, and I go, I know you're such a liar and a false teacher because you're claiming the word for is in that sentence and it's not, because he's saying, oh yeah, because he does say things like, here we go. You've been lying over and over again and adding your own thoughts to the Bible during this conversation. And I can tell this because you say stuff the Bible never says. Maybe you should restudy the Bible and consider not saying things the Bible never says. I said, I know you're such a liar and a false teacher because you're claiming the word for is in that sentence and it's not. At least not in the place he's claiming it, right? So right here, I get into the Hebrew argument. And this one, he never answers. This is the end of it. James, here's some common Hebrew prepositions that can mean for. So it's like le, le is how it's transliterated. This preposition is often used to indicate the purpose or direction, similar to for in the English. For example, la ribim and Daniel 9:27 means for many, right? So we saw that this right here, this preposition, right? Le. So right here, this law right here. So that would be for many, okay? So then you got this one where it's like biad, uh, be apostrophe ad. This can mean for in the sense of on behalf of or for the benefit of. And then you got al, which sometimes is used in context where for means because of or on account of. So in Daniel 9:27, the phrase Shavua Akkad translates to 1 week or 1/7. The preposition le used in la, la, Laribim, so for many up here, means for many, but there's no direct preposition for the word for before 1 week. This context implies that the duration within which the covenant is confirmed or strengthened, right? So the context only implies the duration within which the covenant is confirmed or strengthened. So sometime within that 1 week. Or else, if it was supposed to be for 1 week, it would have that word la in the beginning of it. We do not see that there. So that's about it. So I think clearly we can see that these futurists are doing more butchering of the text when they're saying that it has to mean 4-7. You don't know. You don't know how long this. If that's really about the Antichrist, you're don't okay you're I would at least argue that, let's say I'm wrong, it really is about the Antichrist. You're being very wicked and deceiving, and you're working for the Antichrist if you're saying it's only 7 years, because it's just saying the covenant's gonna happen sometime within there. So now if the Antichrist makes a covenant for 8 years or 100 years, he's got everyone fooled because they're like, oh guys, it's not 7 years. But the text doesn't even say that. See, I would actually say you're working for the Antichrist here if that really is about the Antichrist, because now you're trying to fool people into thinking it's only going to be 7 years when the text doesn't say that. It just says sometime within that period he's going to confirm a covenant. It doesn't say for how long. So you guys are lying here. You guys are trying to deceive people. Even if I'm wrong, even if it really was about the Antichrist, you're being the deceivers, because you're saying it's only 7 years, guys. So all we got to do is worry about a 7-year covenant by the Antichrist. Oh, deceivers. You are such deceivers, because now all the Antichrist has to do is say, yeah, these futurists are helping me, because now all I got to do is do it for 8 years and I got victory. See, it's just, I mean, it just doesn't make sense. Oh, I got a lot of people watching. Thanks. So sorry, I just want to get through that. Um, and let's see some of the comments. So I haven't seen self and heaven is heaven itself anointed or Christ. Oh yeah, because he's talking about the anointing the most holy place. That part of the scripture. So Jesus completed this at the cross. At the time of Jesus, it was for the Jews and then the Gentiles. So Adrian Mason says SDA claimed the 70 as a unit are cut off from the 2,300, but you are correct that the anointing is part of the 70, and it can't be extended to some later date, which they claim 1844. Yeah, so that person, this futures right here, they're doing a very similar argument. Because, Jesus, Seventh-day Adventists will say in 1844, Jesus anointed the heavenly sanctuary. So, and it sounds like this person, I guess I could twist the words to say this only concerns Israel anointing the Messiah. But did I guess Paul didn't do it? And is so Paul's not Israel, but didn't Paul and other Jews anoint the Messiah? I mean, if you want to say it from that futurist sort of perspective, what about so all those Jews lied when they claimed that Jesus was the Messiah? See, now, I mean, now it sounds like so much blasphemy at this point. So, if Paul is a liar for claiming Jesus is Messiah, is that anointing him? If you want to say like you're waiting for the Jews to anoint him as Messiah, I'm pretty sure Paul and a bunch of Jews, all the apostles called Jesus Messiah. So isn't that anointing if you're trying to take the Daniel 9:24 to mean that, just referring to this person? That I mean the person who wrote this James guy. So Jesus made a new covenant, the New Testament. I don't even think did the did this even go into the Kanos argument? I think some of my points got erased on here. For some reason they didn't show up. Because one of my points is that Greek word in Hebrews 9 that he keeps bringing up, that's not like a brand new covenant. It just like the word kainos, Kainos, that's how it's transliterated from the Greek. It just means to it's like like I said, it's just like when Jesus made that comment about I give you a new commandment. It wasn't really a new commandment. It's a commandment that already existed, but now he's adding another part to it where he goes to love one another, and the new part is as I loved you. So that's why it's new. It's refreshed, but it's not like that commandment never existed before. But it's new as in new, like refreshed or strengthened. So Jesus came to earth to die. I believe Satan didn't see it coming because God can't die, but he can lay his own life down, which no man can take from him, to lawfully make a new covenant and will last. Oh, and can make a new covenant, a last will, and and testament, that we might be reconciled to our heavenly Father. Yeah, so I agree with all that. The covenant didn't start until his death, though. Yeah. So, next level says the Jews had many covenants. The Antichrist is needed with the third temple. Chris, the argument is the verse 27 is about about a negative figure. It can't be positive as to be Christ. Yeah, oh yeah, it can be. How do you say? Why do you say that? Because see, it says, like I said, you know what? I'm going to copy all this because I want to fix something. Because this is what's messing people up. I know it is. Because so let me just kind of bring up Word. Because see, if I go and paste this. See, what I think it is when we break these into verses, I think that's doing a lot of damage. I want to do this. I want to take out that 27 where it got broken at, right? I just want this to be one continuous verse. So after the 60 and 2 weeks. Oh, wait a minute, not this. Well, actually, I'll just go ahead and do this because I think this is all part of the problem. We'll just make this whole from verse 25 to 26. And thou dost know, and thou dost consider wisely, that from the going forth to restore and to build Jerusalem until Messiah the leader is 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The broad place has been built again, and the rampart even in the distress of times. So this part right here I believe, is only referring to the first 49 years, right? The first 7 weeks. So, and then there's going to be a 62-week period of time. So now it's telling us what's going to happen after the 49. After the 60 and 2 weeks, cut off as Messiah, and the city and holy place are not his, and the leader who hath come to destroy, who hath come doth destroy the people, and it's end with a flood, and till the end, war, determined desolations. And he has strengthened a covenant with many, 1 week. So now it's talking about the final week of this whole 70 weeks. And he has strengthened a covenant with many 1 week. And in the midst of the week, he causes sacrifice and present to cease. So I don't know why this sounds negative. Why does it sound negative if Jesus strengthens a covenant for many? You know what? This would be more correct. And he has strengthened a covenant for many 1 week. And in the midst of the week, he causes sacrifice and present to cease. And I showed you the Hebrew arguments and everything for this. If I go to AI, it's going to tell me the same thing. In fact, you know what? Let's go to AI, because I think this would be an important point. So in Daniel 9:27, would it be an accurate translation to say, let's copy and paste that. Oops. Let me get rid of this. Sorry. And he has strengthened a covenant for many. I'm gonna do this one first. To say for many or with many. I tend to think it should read for many. Question mark.
The translation of Daniel 9 verse 27 can vary slightly depending on the version of the Bible you are reading. The key phrase in question is often translated as either for many or with many. Here are a few examples from different translations. New International Version, NIV, he will confirm a covenant with many for 1/7. In the middle of the 7, he will put an end to sacrifice and offering. English Standard Version, ESV, and he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week, and for half of the week he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering. King James Version, KJV, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. The Hebrew phrase used here is Vihigber Berit Larabim, which can be translated as he will confirm a covenant with many, or he will make a strong covenant for many. The preposition lu can mean to, for, or with, depending on the context. In this case, both for many and with many are considered accurate translations, but they can imply slightly different nuances. For many suggests the covenant is made on behalf of many people. With many implies that the covenant is made in agreement with many people. Given the context of the verse, either translation can be valid, but with many is often preferred in many English translations because it emphasizes the collective agreement aspect of the covenant. Does this help clarify the translation?
Yeah, so see, that's another problem because I think by putting with many, now you could still say that, the way I interpret it can still, it doesn't affect it. But I think if it was for many, it's a lot more clear. And I think that is actually a lot more accurate because Jesus died for many. So that's why the covenant was for many. To say with many, the only reason why a lot of English translations do that is because a lot of churches teach futurism today. And I just think it's not that, I don't think it's as accurate. But the computer says you can do either or, right? The AI is telling us we can do either or, but they're both accurate. But once you start, either way of translating it would be just as accurate. I'm wondering, is one way more accurate than the other, though? Because I'm wondering if this is Jesus who confirmed a covenant or strengthened a covenant with, or I mean, for many. Oops, let me get this. Which would be more accurate, with many or for many? Because I think this little nuance does make kind of a big deal because it makes it more clear if it's for many, because to me it looks like Jesus died for many, whereas I think these other people are interpreting with many to be like someone like an antichrist drawing up a covenant. But I'm just wondering, is there any way of reading that Hebrew to where we can get a clearer understanding of which way should actually be read?
Your question about the translation of Daniel 9, verse 27 is indeed significant, as the nuance between for many and with many can influence the interpretation of the passage. The Hebrew phrase in question is, Vihigber beret larabim. Here's a closer look at the key components. Vihigber, this verb, means to make strong or to confirm. Beret, this noun, means covenant. Larabim, this prepositional phrase, can be translated as for many or with many. The preposition lu in Hebrew can mean to, for, or with, depending on the context. Translation considerations. For many. This translation emphasizes the covenant being made on behalf of many people. It aligns with the idea of a sacrificial act, such as Jesus' death being for the benefit of many. With many. This translation suggests a collective agreement or confirmation involving many people. It can imply a broader participation or acceptance of the covenant. Contextual interpretation. Messianic interpretation. If the passage is interpreted as referring to Jesus, for many might be preferred, highlighting the sacrificial nature of his covenant. Antichrist interpretation. If the passage is seen as referring to an end times figure like the Antichrist, with many might be used to emphasize a deceptive agreement made with many people. Scholarly insights. Jewish and Christian perspectives. Jewish interpretations often focus on the historical and immediate context of the prophecy, while Christian interpretations might see it as a messianic prophecy. Both perspectives can influence the preferred translation. Given these nuances, both translations have merit, but the choice between for many and with many can depend on the theological and contextual framework you are using. Consulting various translations and commentaries can provide additional insights and help clarify the intended meaning. Does this help clarify the translation for you? Bible Hub. Jews for Judaism.
So he said the New Testament would have mentioned this if this was the case. It's the middle because he rules 42 months, 3.5 years. Well, this is all asserting it onto the text. I mean, you have to assert all of that onto the text. There's nothing in that prophecy that says an antichrist is going to rule. You don't know how long he's going to rule for. You just simply don't. You can fool people by having an antichrist come along and be 8 years, because the text itself doesn't even say. It just says he will confirm or make a covenant with many 1 week. So that's like me buying a car and you thinking that I only bought the car for 1 week. No. If I say I'm going to buy a car 1 week, that doesn't mean that when I buy the car, it's only going to last a week, or it's only going to be for a week, or that it's taken me a whole week to buy a car. It's just saying, like, I mean, might only take me 1 day to buy a car, right? It might only take me 1 second to buy a car. And all I gotta do is just sign an agreement. Maybe that's all I gotta do is put my signature on something. You don't know how long, and you don't know how long that car is gonna last. So you just don't. You can't assert information that's not there. It just says at some point there's going to be a covenant made, or not a covenant, but a covenant's going to be strengthened. And like I said, the Hebrew word bara and ash is not in that text. It's that word, this Hebrew word right here. That's the word in the text. You have to have bara if someone's making a covenant. So that means, or creating something new, bara. Those words are not in the Hebrew text. So he's not making anything. So B separate says, I agree. Jesus Christ was a minister of the circumcision for the truth of God to confirm the promises made unto the fathers. Romans 15:8. Glad to see that there are only 9 people listening to your horrific attempt to explain this most precious revelation of the Lord. Yeah, you know what? I think it's really horrible when you guys are being blasphemous and denying that he didn't complete it, because it says that you cannot have those 6 things fulfilled by some other means. I honestly think to interpret this prophecy any other way is blasphemous. I can't even, like, how do you sit there and think that any part of this, like, well, I can't use that part. But I just don't get how people can take this up here and attribute, and like, this doesn't even say anything about the Antichrist. When you read verse 24, it says 70 weeks are determined for thy people, for thy holy city, to shut up the transgression, to seal up sins, to cover iniquity, and to bring in everlasting age enduring, and to bring in righteousness age enduring, and to seal up vision and prophet, and to anoint the holy of holies. Right. So when was a holy of holies anointed? Like, I mean, Jews had to anoint someone, right, to bring an everlasting righteousness. Or so are you saying that this has got to come again? But you're saying that verse, if Jesus is doing it in okay, you're saying verse 27 is about an antichrist, and some people even say a third temple. Now, when people say a third temple, that is just, you're just writing a whole new Bible here. Because see, right here, how many times do we see a temple built in this prophecy? How many times is Jerusalem built in this prophecy? We only see it built one time, and we saw that it gets well, it doesn't exactly say it's destroyed. It just says there's desolations determined. Oh, it does say destroy the people, and its end is with a flood. So to me, that's what happened the first time around. Jerusalem got destroyed. We know it's been destroyed. So where's the second rebuilding at? See, we know the prophecy started with a decree to restore and build Jerusalem. That's Ezra 7, 457 BC. Add 490 years to. Your guys don't even have time periods that can match up to prophecy. Where's your time period at? You say it's 483. If you add 483 years to 444 BC or 445 BC, you get 40 AD. You don't even. So when did Messiah get crucified? But in this text, it says he gets crucified after 483 years. But yet, we know Messiah got crucified sometime between 30 and 33 AD, is what a lot of people will say. Now, the only possible 2 dates are 30 and 31, in my opinion. There's no way it can be. 32 or 33. I don't think the archaeology holds up to that. But just for the sake of discussion, most people say 30 to 33. No one says 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, or 40 or 41, right? They don't say this. So if you add 483 years to 444 BC, you're going to get something like you're going to get like 40 AD, right? It just doesn't fit, because the prophecy clearly says he's cut off after it. Well, afterwards, and you can't do that thing where you take and go, oh well, I mean, what you're supposed to do is take 365, hold on, it's 360. You times it by 483, you get 173,880 days. Then you divide it by a Gregorian year of 365.25, and you get your 476. So you guys are removing 7 years off the prophecy by doing, and you think you got rights to, because you do this clever little math. And I don't think you have a right to do that. There's nothing in the entire Bible where we see anyone doing that. You're just asserting that onto the text. There's no way. It's like there's no such thing as the 360-day prophetic year. It's never mentioned once in the text. The text tells you in Genesis what shall be for. You guys don't even like read Genesis. I guess you guys hate Genesis, because Genesis 1:14 says, what does it tell us will be for days and for years and for Moedim? It says the lights in the sky. So it does not say any other way of telling time. That's it. That's all we're given. Is the lights in the sky to tell the time. And it says that you got to show me a verse where a day and a year is determined any other way. And you can't find it because it doesn't exist. So when you just take the Bible at its simple, just the simple stated facts in the Bible, and we know what a Jewish lunar solar year is, either 354 or 384 days, give or take 1 day, because of the cycle of the moon being 29.5 days, right? 29.5 days in a lunar month, right? So that's why it's a give or take of about a day. But roughly 354 days for a regular year, 384 days for a Jewish leap year, and a 19-year Metonic cycle. You have uh, you'll have 12 months of about 354 days, 7 months, and just remember, seven's a godly number, so 7 months of leap years, right? Which is 384 days. A 19-year Metonic cycle is very close to 19 years on a Gregorian calendar. So you cannot do that. There's no way you're gonna change this prophecy, because Jews, their sacrifice systems and all this other stuff is based on that lunar solar calendar. They gotta do their Passover at certain times. They gotta have certain offerings. These certain offerings mean certain things during the seasons, right? These things got to be in their season when they do them at their appointed times. Who appointed the times? God appointed the times. So God tells you to do these feasts at their appointed times. Well, where do we see that God made appointed times? In Genesis 1:14, he appointed, because he's telling us, I made the moon and the sun and the stars for their appointed times, right? For these appointed times, that's the Moedim. So you cannot, we cannot take and twist a prophecy to be at your appointed time. It's got to be by God's appointed time. So we have to keep his lunar solar calendar, which is what all this time is based on. The prophecy is based on his time. What is God's time? God's time is the time he laid down in Genesis, because he's the one who created it, and he's the one who said, this shall be for days, years, and Moedim. So we got to use what he says. And when we use what he says, you start with 457 BC to 34 AD. That's 490 years on a lunar solar calendar, and also on a Gregorian calendar, 490 years. That's what the Jews use. And when I talk to all these futurists, they don't even know hardly anything about the lunar solar calendar or about the Jewish feast, right? They have no hardly any idea. They just go right down to verse 27. They have no idea about dates and times and how things are dated. And so you're following these prophecy teachers that are false because they're just hopping down to verse 27. And I don't think they're doing much critical thinking at all. Because that Messiah, his death did something in verse 24. One of those things. Did it cover iniquity? Did he bring in righteousness, age enduring? If you say his death did accomplished any of the things in verse 24, then it cannot be outside the 490 years. It cannot be outside the 70 weeks. It cannot be in a gap. And verse 26 says, after the 62 weeks, cut off as Messiah. Well, we know the 7 already occurred because that was to rebuild and to restore and build Jerusalem. And that's when the broad place had been built again, and the rampart, and which they say was in the distress of the times. And now, so and then it says, and then after the 62 weeks, so now it's 69 weeks altogether, cut off as Messiah. But that's after. So that means the 483 are gone, and now you only have 1 week left. But if Messiah is not cut off in that week, then he's outside of the 70 weeks. If you say he's cut off in that gap, now he's outside the 70 weeks. So now anything that his death cannot mean anything for fulfilling that verse 24. So his death did not seal up sins. It did not cover iniquity. It did not bring in everlasting righteousness. You start to get into a point of blasphemy here. This prophecy is real simple. It's like, stop holding on to it just because you're emotional. You want to believe it's about an antichrist, because I don't know why you want to believe it's about an antichrist. Why do you even want to believe it? The text just doesn't even say it. So at this point, it's like you just want to force it in. Like when you have to take and have all these weird dates that don't even match up. It's like, why do it? Add your 483 years to 444 BC. You get 40 AD. But the prophecy says he's cut off after. So did Jesus get crucified in 41, 42, 43, 44 AD? No. Okay, so that doesn't make sense. You want to go to the decree by well, you call it a decree by Cyrus, but that was only to rebuild the temple. That wasn't to restore Jerusalem. And that decree, because remember it says, from the going forth of the word to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah the later. Well, that was no decree to rebuild Jerusalem that Cyrus gave. It wasn't restored. It didn't get restored until the people started coming back, which was in Ezra chapter 7. Just read it. And why did the Bible choose to have Ezra's decree laid out, which takes up almost a whole chapter? Maybe that's because it's a very important decree, because it relates to this. Whereas we don't even see, like, people call that a decree in Nehemiah. I think it's chapter 1. And they try to argue that that's a decree, right? It's either in chapter 1 or 2. But they try to say, oh, that's a decree. And it's not even, we don't even see it written down. The Bible doesn't even bother to record what's said in that decree. And what it really is just papers given to Ezra so he can get lumber to build a wall, and to have safe pass. That's not, you read that decree in Ezra, that's totally different. I mean, Artaxerxes is giving them gold, telling them to teach the people God's law, and the Jews are being returned back to Jerusalem. You can't really build any. You have to have the Jews returning to Jerusalem before you can start building it. And when people try to say Cyrus's decree, okay, that's 538 BC, but you add 483 years to that, you get. I think it stops you somewhere around what? like somewhere around 50 BC. I can't do the math right off the top of my head. Somewhere right around 40 or 50 BC, right? Well, we know Jesus wasn't crucified in 40 or 50 BC. And then some people might want to try to say, well, the 49 happened, and then the 62 weeks pick up, and then the 62 weeks add all the way up to 33 AD, but you can't find an event to start that 62 weeks. See, that's the problem. There's no event to tell me where you guys can make a rock solid case. Oh, and this is where we start the 62 weeks. What starts it in history? So, and when you're reading this, it basically looks like it's telling us after everything's been built again, then the 62 weeks start, right? Well, okay, we know Jerusalem starts to get rebuilt by the decree of Ezra in 457 BC. By 408 BC, everything's restored. So, oh, what? And that matches up to the 49 years. Because you look at everything instituted within that 49-year time period, it fits what the context of this. And then you just go 62 more weeks until Messiah. So go 434 years later from 408 BC, and you get 27 AD. Okay, now we got the final 7 years, 27 AD to 34 AD. We know Jesus got crucified sometime in. I mean, why not just do it the real simple way? Why is it? Because the way you guys are doing it, it's like you guys can't even hold your own in a debate, and it's confusing. And you're clearly just asserting everything. And even the way I can make an argument that Jesus fulfilled everything that's laid out in verse 24. All that's fulfilled. Everything that has happened, right? That's a fulfilled prophecy. So I just don't get why people want to argue so hard about that. I think it's very blasphemous to argue any other way, to think that's about a future antichrist. That ruler will make a strong agreement with many people. He will promise to do it for 7 years, what he said in that agreement. But when that time is half finished, he will prevent priests from giving any more offerings and sacrifices to God. A disgusting idol will be put in the highest part of the temple and will stay there until God gets rid of the one who put it. What? So you believe in this futurism stuff? No, it doesn't. It doesn't say that it will be. It will. Yeah, you're adding to it, just like this person did that I was reading. He hath strengthened a covenant with many. It doesn't say how long. It just says 1 week. Like, I will buy a car 1 week. It doesn't say how long it's going to take me to buy a car. I could be sitting there with a purchasing agreement for 2 days, or I could just put a signature one day and it's bought. And the similar language is here. And he has strengthened a covenant. And like I said, the word bara and Assad are not even in that text. So he's not creating a covenant. And again, I see that you're saying the ruler will make. The word make is not in there. It's confirm or strengthen a covenant. So I really don't. So you're kind of adding these words in there that are not in there. So I don't know if you're. Oh, maybe I missed something. I hope you're not believing this. I might have missed something. I don't want to misrepresent someone because maybe they're just repeating what someone else just said out of curiosity. Out of curiosity, I looked this verse up in my study app. Okay, all right, sorry. Maybe this person doesn't even believe it, and they're just reading what the study app's telling them. So sorry about that. Sorry. Out of curiosity, I looked up this verse in my study app where I have multiple translations and dictionaries, etc. And here's what the translation for translators say. Okay, I'm so sorry about that. I'm very sorry. I kind of skipped down too far, I guess, and missed that part. So I'm very sorry. Um, so you're saying in Daniel 9:26 through 27 that what you're reading from this study app is saying all this stuff. Okay, sorry. I did misrepresent what you were saying by accident, so I'm sorry. Um, that ruler will make a strong agreement with many people. He will promise to do for 7 years what he said in that agreement, but when that time is half finished, he will prevent priests from giving any more offerings and sacrifices to God. A disgusting idol will be put in the highest part of the temple, and it will stay there until God gets rid of the one who puts it there, which is what he said he would do. Okay, and you're saying that you thought that was interesting, that that study app said, okay, got it. Okay, cool. Awesome. Rapture soon. I don't know about that. Because the same people that teach the rapture are teaching that this is a future prophecy. So, um, I mean, I used to think there might be a rapture, but now I'm like, oh, I don't know, because look who's pushing the whole rapture theory, and it just doesn't make sense when I see people suffering in other parts of the world and throughout history for God, and yet, oh, I get raptured. I'm special. I get raptured, even though I think most America is doing things to cause the antichrist to rise up, right? When we promote people like Donald Trump instead of seeking better candidates, and getting more involved in our primaries. It's like, why was most of the so-called um, Christians in this country cheering for Donald Trump after he pushed something on you that looked like the mark of the beast, right? I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying a lot of people said it looks like that. And yet the same people that were saying that go vote for him. It doesn't make any sense. And yet, but those same people will also say they're going to get raptured. So I guess they think that they can usher in a one world government and then they get raptured and they don't have to face the consequences. And I don't know. It just seems really weird, especially when you have people just dying and suffering throughout history. That's why I can't believe in that. But anyway, Gary says, who says the government is a peace agreement? What if it's the Noahide laws we're hearing about? I don't know. I don't think nothing of the Noahide laws. I mean, for Christians already obeying the Noahide laws because they're basically the same laws of God. I don't even know why people even freak out about the Noahide laws because they're not that bad. I mean, it's okay. So it's kind of like my government already makes a law against murdering. I don't, it doesn't bother me. I'm not supposed to murder anyway. Um, so Darius Pollock says the covenant is not for 7 years, but it will take 7 years to establish it, with the first half completed by Jesus and the second half to do with the two witnesses. Yeah, and some people like to split that up into two parts. I don't think it's necessary, because like down here, um because when it says, and by the wing of abominations one is making desolate, I hate how they put he in here, because he is not even in that text. Even till the consumption, that which is determined is poured out upon the desolate one. Like I said, Young is a futurist, right? So I'm reading from a futurist who's trying to interpret this Bible literally, and he's not actually doing it literally, because there's nothing in here you would have where you would have like this marker that makes this into he or anything like that, or any kind of oh, what's it called, any kind of noun that's like he right here. I'm not even sure. I can't even remember if one is in there. I know a cod isn't in there, or yeah, a cad, which means one. I probably should just read a different version, but I don't want to get into that because that's like too much off of where I'm trying to go with this. It wasn't the Roman Jerusalem War 7 years and the temple destroyed in the middle of those 7 years in 70 AD. Okay, some people try to say that, right? And they go, well, like, I think Donnie from Standing from Truth, he'll try to say that 66 to 73 AD was a 7 year period. Right. And then the temple was destroyed in the middle of that. And then he thinks there's going to be a future fulfillment of that, where it's a global fulfillment of it. And I don't believe in that, because it's like, if that's the case, you would also have to have the rest of this prophecy repeated, right? If it's a type, then we're going to see another 70 weeks, and then we're going to see this happening globally, right? So we're going to see another 490-year period if the prophecy is supposed to repeat like that. And then and then if you're thinking, oh, it gets broken up into two phases. Okay, so where's the first 69 weeks, and then where's the next 7-year period, right? The final 7-year period. It's like, it's just, to me, is making it real messy. It's like, um, so, with Jerusalem being destroyed within that 7-year period of time, I can see why people would think well, that would cause the sacrificial system to end, because, the temple got destroyed within that 7-year period. But I mean, that war, to me, I don't know. To me, it looked like the war was pretty much over at that point, in 70 AD, and then that's just some added rebellion and war, but everything was kind of over by 70 AD. So I don't think it lasted 7 years. Um, I think that would fit more like the 1,000 or the 1,290 days in Daniel 12 when it talks about that. Um, that's where I think that 3.5 year period comes. I'm not going to get real deep into that topic. Jesus came for only the Israelites, not the Gentiles. The Gentiles Peter and Paul preached to were of the lost 10 tribes. Well, yeah, I mean, I could see how you could say that, but it wound up going out to the Gentiles. But actually, I don't know. I mean, I can't say that it wasn't really for. I mean, yeah, it's for the Jews, but remember that the Jews were not all blood Jews, right? Like when you would go, because there was a lot of people that were Gentiles who became Jews because they'd start to go to the temple and accept the Jewish scriptures as truth, and then they got converted into Judaism and they became Jews. They were called Jews, right? So, I mean, so we can't say that Jesus only came from blood Jews. It's like it's still the same thing. He came for believers. So yeah, I mean, he's not really coming for like the lost, but I mean, for like the people that aren't believing. I mean, I think you make that argument. Like, I mean, because I'm pretty sure a Gentile could become an Israelite, can become a Jew. The two witnesses' ministry will be directed towards the Gentiles who killed them because they do not understand the scripture. Okay, that's stuff in Revelation. If you want to say that that's something, but I'm talking about, we don't see two witnesses in this text at all. So if you want to, talk about Revelation, that's a whole different topic. But I don't think Revelation has anything to do with. I mean, yeah, part of Revelation does, because I think part of it is telling you about the history leading up to certain points. But as far as like the two witnesses, I mean, people have made arguments that happened all in 70 AD. So, um, I don't know how much to, I don't know, like, I don't know what the two witnesses really relate to this. I mean, because I just want to focus on just the wording here before we start jumping everywhere else, because that's part of the problem too, because they'll jump to Daniel 8 to make an argument about Daniel 9 and saying, well, this part in Daniel 8 is about a future antichrist, and it's about this temple and a future temple, and it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. I think Daniel 8 was about Antiochus Epiphanes, and that's already a past prophecy. And then they'll jump to something else in Matthew and say, well, this in Matthew means it's future. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I don't think that's saying that here. So what I want to do is first focus on just understanding what this text is saying. I don't want to keep jumping to all different parts of the Bible. It's like I want to understand historically what this text is saying. What can we learn right before Jesus even steps on the scene? What can we understand about the wording of this prophecy? You know, um, and what's it saying? And then, like, now let's take historical dates of everything and add that to our understanding as we read this. And it's like, to me, the futurists are still, I mean, what dates do you guys start from? Because I haven't seen any of you guys. Oh, you say you want a link and show me something. You know what? I have to end my show because I have to go study with my kids. So I tell you what I'm gonna do. Maybe if I got a chance, I'll make a show later. I didn't realize 2 hours have went by. So I will, if I got time later tonight, what I'll do is if someone wants to talk about futurism and why they think this is in the future, I want you to come up on here, but you got to show me dates. You got to show me times. You got to prove all this stuff from this text, right? I got to see how you're reading this text, why you came to these conclusions. As we slowly read through this, I want you guys to tell me how you came to this conclusion as you're reading this text. I want to know your thought process. And I don't want to jump to Daniel 8 and be like, this is about the future antichrist. No, 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 because I don't believe that is. I don't want to be jumping onto all these texts and making all these assertions. I want to go through everything as we just read this chapter and why you're coming to these conclusions as you're reading this chapter. Based on what, and then add to it, like, okay, archaeology evidence, dating, and all this other stuff. But I don't think you guys are going to be able to do it. And Old Testament scripture, like Old Testament scripture that tells you, oh, Chris, this is how we know what that it was a 360-day year according to this scripture right here. Boom. That's what I want to see. So if you're going to argue it's supposed to be a 360-day year, you got to show me the scripture for that. That makes that argument rock solid. I also want to see rock solid the scripture for these decrees, because we're going to talk about the dating of the decrees, so we know what decree we start this prophecy on. And we're going to discuss the wording of these decrees. We're not going to ignore this like you guys like to do. We're going to discuss this. We're not just going to start assuming this is about an antichrist. I want to see how you came to that conclusion just by reading this text.